Welcome to the Gen Z show. Today, my special guest is Ted Wolfe. Ted Wolfe is the site pastor in Ellensburg, Washington at Central Washington University for Resident Church. And he and I connected over one key principle that we're going to talk about today in great depth. And that is, why are young people today have such an acute fear of the future? There's always been apprehension about what is next for me in life for youth. But today's youth are seeing an increasing fear of the future. A recent survey shows that 75% of young people agree that the future is frightening. 75%. That is an amazing number. 3 out of 4 say the future is frightening. Why is that? What can you do to help? And how can we, as adults and those who work with youth and engage in their community, what can we do to help them overcome this fear? Well, our friend Ted and I talk about this today. You're really going to love this. Check out the show notes so you can find out more about Ted and his ministry at Resident Church in Ellensburg, Washington. Let's go straight to the show. Ted, welcome to our show today. Thank you for being our guest.
You bet. You bet. Glad to be here. It's an honor.
Well, let's do a shout out to our mutual friend, Amy Kelly, who connected us. So thank you to Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate it.
She is a very special person, and we appreciate everything that she continues to do in her work and also being a supporter of us as well. So, Ted, our audience heard me at the beginning, as they always do, introduce our guests, but they really would love to hear from you about what you want them to know. So if you wouldn't mind, take a few minutes and introduce yourself to our Gen Z audience.
You bet. You bet. So I'm Ted Wolfe, pastor out in Washington State. I pastor a church of college students, mostly college students, in Ellensburg, Washington, which I got to learn that James has been to before, and it's a very small place. So if you've been to Ellensburg before, I'd be surprised, honestly, if any of your listeners have been there. But I'm 27 and been married for 4.5 years, and we had a son, our first child, last year, who's 13 months old. And so we're learning the ins and outs of parenting and how that's going. So he's growing crazy fast. So getting married and then have a kid as I've been pastoring, it's just in the midst of COVID over the last few years, it's just lots of disarray, but lots of learning in that experience as well. So.
Well, Ted, when you and I first met, we were talking about so many different things, but one of the topics that came up, and immediately when it came up, I said, we need to share this with our audience, is you mentioned that a lot of the young people that you're working with are displaying a fear of the future. Mm-hmm. Now, we know about, FOMO, fear of missing out, but fear of the future, that seems like for young people to be something that a lot of folks that are in older generations might not understand. Why are you fearful of the future? There's so much opportunity and things that can excite you. Why do you think that young people today, in your observations, are afraid of the future or have this fear?
Mm-hmm. Man, that's the question. That's the loaded question with lots of answers or one big answer. And the funny thing is, I'm actually right in the middle of a sermon series right now. And even as before I hopped on the call, was like chugging away at this. And I was like, oh, this is what James and I are going to talk about today. It's actually really funny. So, but I mean, just so much has happened, over the last, I guess I would say 2 decades. And so anyone who grew up, in the early 2000s, you had the housing crash in 2008. And they saw their parents go through that. Everyone, this next generation seeing that. And then COVID itself as well, the whole pandemic. I mean, that was a real thing that affected this generation. So thinking about the future, I mean, all the climate change, like whatever it is, like there's so many things going on in the world, but also just here in America, like they've been this next generation who's thinking about their future doesn't see a whole lot of opportunity. And, recently there's been a lot of, especially with tech stuff, people being laid off. So it's not that bright, amazing American dream type outlook, maybe as the earlier generations have seen. A lot more competition, a lot of fear from the pandemic and things. And so it makes sense to me that people are worried about, what am I going to do? What's life going to be like? Where am I supposed to land? Like, It's
Hmm.
very, very overwhelming.
Do you think young people are just having this anxiety because of what they're seeing in the media, what they're
Mm.
seeing? What's causing this? Because I'm 53,
Mhm.
and when I was in high school and even in college, there was apprehension about what am I going to do when I get out of
Sure.
school. Maybe what, but I wouldn't say it was fear. I didn't know anyone that was afraid. I knew people who were delaying getting out of college, not because they were afraid of the future, more so because they were just enjoying the life that they had now.
Sure.
So why is this sudden shift in mentality? I mean, because we grew up in a Cold War. We grew up where we
Mm.
thought that any day could be a nuclear war and we all could be wiped off the planet, and yet there didn't seem to be as much anxiety. What is going on here? You think it's social media, news? What's going to happen?
Mhm. So I guess on a large scale, yeah, that'd be my guess. Social media, I mean, it's easy to get caught in an echo chamber of this is all that I'm hearing about. So whether it's
Mm,
politics and the tensions between people, or the rising racial tension, or um, yeah, even just what I'm supposed to do as a job, which, in college, that's who I work with. Like that's normal to be like, what am I supposed to do the rest of my life? Um, but with having all of what's going on in the world, plus your own personal stuff, and then you back that up maybe with what your parents, the struggles your parents went through that affected you personally, it's just this multifaceted, oh man, it's out there, it's in me personally, and in my family, I've experienced much that leads to my fear and my outlook of the future. Um, and then just having the constant social media not just be what I'm seeing, but also, if I'm being honest, even a distraction. Like it's really
mm.
easy to distract ourselves with so much entertainment that's being produced nowadays. So there's the emotions underneath not being addressed and just being dealt with by these coping mechanisms that are entertainment, social media, whatever it is. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how it's changed so dramatically. I taught high school um, during the '90s, and there was maybe a little bit of stress about what am I going to do when I get out of high school. What am I going to do when I go into college? But there wasn't as much fear as there was excitement about what was upcoming.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the guys, we're recording this on April 20th. And the only reason I bring this up is because I was teaching school on April 20th, the day of Columbine. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember the anxiety and stress that was going on the students that day, which was, very recognizable and understandable. But still, it seems like we're seeing something completely different. How is it being manifested, you think, in the youth that you're encountering? Because you're working with college students, and
Mm-hmm.
you're working with, well, right now they're Gen Zers. They're the older Gen Zers,
Right.
medium level Gen Zers. So they're, how are they feeling? How's this working with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that, so I mean, to your point, there's been many hard things, lots of hard things that have happened throughout the generation. So I don't know if it's a lack of, or sorry, an increase in scary hard things happening, but
Yeah.
how that's dealt with, I think is the issue. So
Mm.
I'm 27, so iPhone kind of came out when I was a teenager, and so I'm on the cusp of being a millennial. This cusp generation is like iGen, I guess. And so
Yeah.
I'm not I don't have all the research. What I've listened to and the documentaries I've watched about social media and all those things, how everything just distraction. Plug in here, what I'm being fed here affects me, and how I don't address what's actually going on underneath. It just continues to grow and simmer under the surface. And so if anxiety and fear never gets addressed with talking about it, then it just keeps simmering and growing. And so when you think about the future and it makes you anxious and worried, but you don't address it, you just go back into the cycle of distract and entertain. But then you feel the effects of not addressing your fear and worry, that leads to anxiety. And then you get anxious about thinking about it, and you go back to distracting yourself from it. It's just this like cycle. And so I don't know if it's more hard things are happening. I just think it's less of it being dealt with on a personal level, really addressing, why am I anxious? Why am I anxious about the future? Why am I anxious
Yeah.
about my test tomorrow? Like,
Do you think that we're not, maybe parents, maybe teachers, educators, us as a culture, we're not preparing young people as well as we did before, or what is the difference? Because I'm thinking my generation, the latchkey generation, not that we had it all together and stuff, but it seems like that they were able to handle those types of issues. But I also want to point out that nobody was sitting us down giving us a 10-step program on how to deal with stress or how to deal with anxiety. They were just kind of pushing us out. So why now? Why is it, what are we doing wrong, I guess?
That's a great question. Because
that's a question that everybody is listening to us right now as Ted is going, yeah, what are we doing wrong? Please tell us. And we're like, we don't know.
That's the question. I could only give you opinion and theory. And, obviously I walk with students, I walk with college students, and it's less about giving an answer. It's more about, well, why are you anxious about that? Why are you afraid of that? And I follow Jesus. And so there's specific truths about, even I was writing this sermon series I was telling you about, like, when you believe that there's a God who's sovereign and control of your life and has ordered your steps, there's comfort in that. When you believe that there's a God, what Jesus in Hebrews talks about, he's a sympathetic high priest. We can come to him, approach his throne of grace with confidence. You can express everything to him. That doesn't mean that circumstances get fixed or how hard things are. I guess the difficulty of it lessens. But the truth is, then you understand that there's a perfect heavenly Father you have a relationship with. You can go to him. There's a king who came and died for you so you could have a relationship with him. And that's where true comfort comes from. And so I know when people go and express these things, in therapy or counseling, it's so helpful to talk about the why. I can't tell you why there's this maybe why anxiety has risen to the highest levels or fear has risen to the highest levels. But my guess is it's the not addressing what's underneath constantly. So even on campus, like, I used to see advertisements for events that are fun and, get people to establish friendships with each other, all these cool things, like all this fun and hypey kind of things. And now what I see advertised is like mindfulness and helping students engage their thought life. I see
who's promoting these events? Is that kind of events coming from an administrative type level or support group type levels? I'm just wondering where that's coming from. So
yeah, it's both. It's top down. This is what our students need. This is what the administration is saying. But then there's certain departments, that are promoting the Mental Health Monday, helping students really understand their emotions and the things that are going, their thought life. I saw another class for emotional intelligence 101, how to actually be emotionally mature and deal with your emotions, not just stuff them down. And so your question you asked is basically, is there not resources for these things, or is there less preparation for the world? I don't think so. I think there's lots of resources. I think there's a lot more resources and a lot more understanding, at least across our country, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to the future, when it comes to fear and worry. I can't tell you exactly why the levels have risen to the point that they have, other than, we went through a pandemic, and that's true. We all went through a pandemic. So
there's you mentioned earlier when we were talking about social media that could be a contributing factor. We are beginning to see social scientists now that are actually saying there's not just a correlation between the rise of social media and the rise of mental health issues, but there could be a causation that as social media has become more pronounced, that and I get pushback on that. When I say that, I know somebody out there is going to watch this thing, and I'm going to get email this week when this is done about it. Oh, James, there you are piping again about the social media impact. Again, if they watch it, they know that I don't think it's all bad. I just think it has to. We have to understand it more. If I'm working with youth, or if I have a child that is in this 15 to 26 year range, that target group that seems to have the most anxiety that we're talking about, how do I know that they have this fear of future? What signs that you have had experiences with that you could share with someone? They're coming to you and saying, Ted, I want to know. I want to be able to see this before it gets bad. What can I be looking for?
It's a good question. I think I think a good indicator is if you talk about the future with, with any youth, like what's their response? Is it um, dismissive? Are they willing and open? I would also say, like, just because someone's excited, and has a plan, doesn't mean they're not anxious. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if somebody who's emotionally aware can tell if somebody is operating out of anxiety, and anxiety can propel someone. I've learned that anxiety can lead someone to be the most motivated and get the things done, and they work hard, work. There's no peace. There's no security on the inside. And anxiety can do the opposite. It can lead you to draw away and not carry out your responsibilities and things. And so the best thing anyone can do is just ask. Just ask,
Mm-hmm.
how are you feeling about the future? How are you feeling about that test tomorrow? How are you feeling about your game? And really get into the root, getting to what's underneath. So if anxiety and fear and all those things are emotions and feelings, that's what's on the surface. Well, then what's the why? Have you ever heard of the 5 whys?
Go ahead,
Asking the
man.
5 whys. Okay, the 5 whys. So you ask, I said, James, what are you anxious about? What are you afraid of in the future? We'll just go that. And you say, I'm afraid I won't get a career. I won't have a long lasting career that I'll enjoy. Well, why? And then you give me your reasoning. Well, I just don't know if I'll, perform well enough in the job market nowadays. Well, why? Well, I just don't know if I have the experience, and if somebody is going to want to hire me onto their team. Well, why? I just don't know if I have the capabilities. As not to take nothing wrong with your age, obviously, but there's some younger guys out there who have the experience maybe that I have, but maybe have more of the availability.
Mm-hmm.
You just keep going down, plumbing deeper and deeper and deeper and getting to the root. And then you go, is that actually true? Is that actually true? Am I not as good of a worker as, somebody who is 10 years younger than me who has more experience? Well, I don't think so. I think you're a great worker, and just getting to the truth and saying to someone, that's not actually true. That's even in conflict, I do that with people. Like, I don't think so and so likes me. Well, did they tell you that? Well, then no. Well, then it's not true. If they said it to your face, maybe they're not saying that's right, and you get to the ins and outs of that. But really plumbing down to the deepest part of the why, and addressing it and going, but is that actually true?
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's a uh, Bob Tiede who used to
Mm-hmm.
be one of the Bob.
Yep, met Bob.
Well, he uses that same concept. Instead of saying why, he uses the phrase "tell me more." Tell me more about
Mm-hmm.
that. Tell me,
Mm-hmm.
tell me what that means. Tell me more.
That's good.
Which, as we interviewed Bob, almost 2 years ago,
Okay.
and it has become a kind of a catchphrase for us. Me personally, when I'm dealing with my own children, tell me what you mean by that. Tell me what you're
Mm-hmm.
going on in this thing, and I can see them just rolling their eyes and say, "Oh my gosh, this is Dad, the youth coach guy, trying to grab us again here, going on." So it is important to kind of find out what this. Do you see anything that when they're undergoing distress? What are some of the physical things that you see that a parent, an adult can be, or a friend can be looking for in their friend? Have you witnessed anything that is physical going on there? I know
Mm-hmm.
that people can Google and see all the physical signs of stress,
Sure.
but what about anecdotally? What are you seeing?
Yeah. The leg shaking, the
Mm.
tapping, the fidgeting, um, uh, I personally can feel someone is tense. Like there's something going on. Like they're not really present, asking the question. They're not really answering the question. Um, so usually what I do is just say, "What's going on, man?" They just tell me what's up. Like I know you're not present, like right now. So just tell me what's up. Like I care. Like I want to know. I want to, maybe I don't have the answer, but at least I want to hear what's going on. So it's pretty obvious. Somebody's trying to distract themselves even in the moment, like they're trying to get on their phone while you're trying to talk to them. So
Yeah.
I try not to take that personally, having a conversation, but just trying to ask, like, it's very clear that you cannot sit still. You cannot keep eye contact with me, and your answers are a bit short. So you're being a bit avoidant. That's anecdotally, that's what I see.
You know what's funny? When you were mentioning those things and you were saying that, my first thought was he's describing a lot too of what people exhibit physically when they're excited about something. If I'm excited, I may be shaking. I may be a little bit, my leg may be going up and down. I might be fidgety because something great's about to happen. So if the body is reacting the same to something that makes us excited and something that makes us nervous or anxious, then isn't it just all in our head? Isn't it all just our mindset on how we're approaching it?
Could be, depending on what it is. Yes. If we're talking fear of the future, though, that is a very ambiguous, like cloudy. It's just such a lofty thing. For a test, maybe somebody they could be anxious and worried, or they could be excited because they prepared well. So maybe in that example for sure. But if we're talking about the future and all the things that come with the future, it's just a lot of undecided things. So maybe someone is anxious and they're driven to figure out all those things by their own strength, for sure. But it's just such an ambiguous, cloudy, I don't know, uncertainty that I don't know how often. I couldn't pinpoint how often it's excitement for someone.
Well, if parents are out there, or adults or friends are out there, and they're saying, "Hey, I want to help them. I want to do something for them." Could you got something for you in your toolbox? What's that quick? I always kid when I'm working with youth and say, "Hey, if somebody stopped you on the street and asked you this question, would you have an answer?" So if somebody's stopping Ted on the streets of Ellensburg and said, "Hey, I got friends who have a fear of the future. What can I do? What's step one that I do?" What would you tell them? And let's go from like just the basic things, and then we'll go into a little deeper things as we go forward.
It's a good question. I mean, the first initial thing you can do is just ask a question. Like you're saying, Bob TD, like it's all asking questions. Maybe, and not here's the thing for parents or leaders or anyone, like not asking a question so that you can say something, not asking a question so you can try to lead someone to where you want to lead them to, but just asking an honest question, a genuine question, just because you care. So whether it's a parent asking your son or daughter, "Man, how are you feeling about this?" Not in hopes of just feel better, like that's not a coach doing that. "Hey, what's going on? What are you worried about?" "All right, go out there. That's fine. I go out there and hit the baseball, go out there. Like that's not genuine care.
So is that part of it? Asking the question, you actually got to listen for an answer? Oh my gosh.
Yes. Well, what's the point of asking a question if you're not going to listen,
Give lip service to someone is
Basically.
we've seen it. We've seen it so many times. How many teachers ask questions just to check that off the box? And
So I would say, I mean, I know one question isn't the answer because one question leads to another question, another question, another question. But immediately I would say that's the first thing anyone can do. Like ask a question. "Hey, what's going on?"
And listen.
And be genuine. Yes. And listen.
Yeah. And be genuine and listen. Of course, you're not going to know where to go with the next question if
Totally.
you don't on that.
Totally.
So bring it on down a little bit more. That's step one. What would be another
step
thing that you might recommend?
I guess if I'm thinking about the future, if I was going to get real granular, if I was going to think about like, okay, if I have a child who is gearing up to graduate high school, and granted, I got a 13-month-old, so take this with however you take it. Helping my child, if I was going to use my son, helping my son understand, okay, what are you anxious about? What are you afraid of? And then helping them also on the other side, what do you desire to do? Like what's the outlook on, and my hope as a parent, I'm raising them in the truth and in beliefs and integrity and all these things, giving them opportunities to grow and own things and fail forward, and having them know that failure is okay because you learn from it and all those things. But as you're gearing up, what do you care about? What do you enjoy? What do you like to do? What kind of impact you want to have in the world? And then speaking some truth into my son. "Son, you are good at these. I've noticed these things in you. You have leadership capabilities. Also, son, sometimes you're a little bit prideful and you do things so that you're seen." Like just being honest. And that's a very loving thing to do, to call out things that maybe he wouldn't be seeing, but also to say, "Here's your talents. Here's your gifts. Here's what you're good at. I've seen you thrive in this situation. Is there a job that fits some of those things? Is there a calling? Is there a vocation that fits some of those things? I don't know. Let's figure it out together. And just helping my son along the way in that. That's honestly what I do with students here. Students come in freshman year, don't know what they want to do. And you would think like a major counselor, academic advisor would help them figure out those things, but they don't have the personal relationship with that student to
Right.
speak into their lives. Me, as disciple of Jesus, seeking to make disciples in gospel community, my hope is to know them and to befriend them and to speak the truth into their life, but also call out the gifts in their life, to encourage them, to walk with them. And so I know counseling, like a counselor, maybe someone thinks about like, I go to counseling once a week for an hour, all these things. And at least in the church, what I've heard works best is that they go to counseling if there's some deep rooted things that the counselor who's professionally trained helps draw out. But then going to a trusted friend group and going, hey, this is what I've been seeing, or this is what's been going on, and being honest in that way. Because if you're gonna quote me on anything, I think this right here is everyone desires to be known. Everyone desires to be completely known and accepted. And so when somebody is known and accepted and you have some trusted friends, then you can trust them when they speak into your life and say, hey, you're really good at this. So-and-so, you're really good at this. Maybe this is what you could consider for your future. I'm seeing this in you. Is your major align with that? If not, that's something for you to consider, because I'm not going to tell somebody what to major in or what not to major in and do for a job, but helping them see clearly the gifts that they have, helping them see maybe some growth areas and some things that they can grow in, and then continuing to walk with them through that process. I know the long answer, but
well, no, I mean what you said spurred the thought to me that there's a book called The Path to Purpose, which is helping young people find their purpose.
okay.
And it actually talks about the fact that when they have a purpose in life, when they feel like there's something they're meant to do, that will their life, and it answers the questions: will my life have meaning? Will I make a difference? Will anyone care? That I lived at all, or what will I become? When they have a purpose on this stuff, it kind of alleviates some of that fear. Because even when they have obstacles that they have to overcome, or trouble that encounters, which
Right.
we're all going to have,
Right.
understanding what their purpose is kind of gives them that end goal. And as a believer, for me, it is my purpose is to glorify God in everything I do. So when the struggles are happening, and am I reaching that purpose, is my daily job and activity here. So I think helping them do that, when you were talking about helping them find what they're good at and stuff, I just flooded into my mind thinking if we could really help them find what their purpose is,
right,
help them reach that. In our coaching program, we talk about life coaches for youth. Their job is different than counselors. Counselors are, as you just so eloquently talked about, are dealing with traumas or dealing with things that are in their past to help them adapt to where they are in the future. But coaches are helping them reach the future. That's a future-oriented type thing. Think of it as a term of what a stagecoach was. A stagecoach is a method of transportation. It takes you from where you are to where you want to go. So if we can help them realize where they want to go, we can help them get there. And then any obstacles. Didn't know I was going to go in that direction today, audience, but that's where it goes.
And I will say this, from what I have learned personally, seen, and then I wouldn't say I read the book, but I heard this principle that everyone wants a guide. Everyone wants somebody who's just a little bit, whether it's an older brother who's a little bit further in life, an older friend, a coach, like you're saying, mentor, like somebody who's able to help, who's just a little bit further, maybe doesn't have it all figured out, but is able to help provide some direction and help prompt, like you're saying, purpose, passion, values, talents, all those things. And not just somebody who's a mentor who's like disconnected, but like I said, somebody who's in it with them and says, I see this in you. And maybe that's something they don't even see, or here's some experience that I can share with you. It's not your experience per se, but here's some experience about buying a house. Here, I can share this with, just something where it's like practical things, lofty things, like whatever it is. It's just somebody who, hey, I got this thing I'm thinking about. Can I just run this by you? The amount of times I get phone calls or texts or all these things, like, and if I don't know the answer, I don't know the answer. That's fine. Like I'm not the answer guru, the sage, but if I can help provide some experience and understanding that the Lord brought to me as I've read the truth, or some life experience about budgeting, for example, I want to help provide that to them, to help them as they're gearing toward what they're aimed at.
So,
So
audience, if you've been listening to what we said, here's some of the things we talked about. First off, asking questions and being a real active listener, really helping them find what they want out of life, finding that purpose, helping them discover those things. Does that mean that when they find that, that's permanent with them? Hey, I guess I bet if you were to sit down and talk with Ted and you say, hey, tell me what you thought your purpose was when you graduated high school, it's much different than what he says now, almost a decade later. And then the last one is as you just talked about, finding someone to be their mentor, their coach, their guide, to help them through that. That's 4 things right there, my friends, that if you can help them with them, you can help alleviate some of this anxiety and fear of the future, at least from my perspective. What do you think on that? So,
you asking me?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's for sure. And I guess if I was going to speak to a parent too, I've heard some. I couldn't quote the research, but especially somebody in high school, who parents love them. Say they've been that help, the parent who's really drawn out the gifts and helping their child see what they're good at, and walking along with them. But if they have somebody in high school who's maybe fresh out of high school, who's a mentor, or older in high school, say you're a freshman in high school and there's a senior in high school who's able to help give some insight to your next few years, what to think about, is so helpful. Alleviates some uncertainty of what they're going to experience. When I came to college, same thing. Like if I would have had somebody, when I actually met some people in college who I wasn't even friends with, but I just got to ask some questions, who were seniors, like, how'd you do this? Or all those things. It just helped provide some direction to the uncertainty that I had looking at my next 4 years when I came to college. So
I think what we've talked about and what you brought up when we first met about helping youth with this, young people with this struggle they have of fear of the future, is just such an important aspect of what we can do pouring into their lives, because you cannot act in a way and contribute to the world in the way that God intends if you're so crippled by fear. And so we've got to we got to do this. We've got to help them overcome this. Hey, if our audience wanted to connect with you, where can they go? What can they find out?
Well, you mentioned about somebody sending you an email, so if you want to send me an email, whether it's expressing some learning that you took away or some disagreement, I take a disagreement too. So you can
appreciate those things. I do. I always respond. I never ignore it.
Totally. Same with me. So yeah, our church's website, resonate.net, where you can find some broad stuff about what we're doing with college students across different college campuses. I work at one college campus, and then my personal website, tedwolfe.mailchimpsites.com, where you can find more personally what my wife and I do with college students here in Ellensburg, with Wildcats. That's our mascot at Central Washington University. And if you want to email me, it's just ted@resonate.net. Super easy. So if you got anything you want to email me and send to me, go for it.
Hey, listen, audience, if you didn't catch those things and you're not watching it, just look down in the show notes. Go to your app. In the show notes, we'll have all that information. We'll have the email address as well, so you can relate to them. Ted, thank you for your time today. It's been a lot of fun. And right there at the end, I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier, or why we hadn't alluded earlier. I was just thinking of the most, when it says the most repeated phrase in the book of Joshua, but it is repeated very often, is fear not. So there you go. That could be our thing. Hey, let's put that in the show notes as well. So so thank you for your time. Audience, thank you for being with us today. Someone that really needs to hear what we've talked about, needs to talk about these tips that we've talked about as well. And we'll see you again next week on our show.